Welcome to the Solid Verbal. The Solid Verbal.
Come after me! I'm a man! I'm 40!
I've heard so many players say, well, I want to be happy. You want to be happy for a day? Eat a steak.
It's that woo-woo!
And now, Dan and Ty.
Welcome back to the Solid Verbal, boys and girls. Ty Hildenbrandt here, Dan Rubenstein over there. solidverbal at gmail.com, as always, is our email address. Don't forget, you can find us at solidverbal.com and sbnation.com. We are also out on iTunes. If you like the show, please do hit subscribe at itunes.com/solidverbal. We are also on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat. And Dan Rubenstein from New York City, how are you, sir?
Hey. Good. I had a lot of fun yesterday and evening and night. Not late night, but it was a really good day of football.
How late were you up last night? How late did you stay up in earnest?
1:15. And I was up
for
at
you.
6 a.m. Oh, yeah. It was real dumb. I regret every single minute of it. But yeah, football was about a little over a 13-hour day yesterday, which is, listen, glad to have it.
Long day, but a good day. Week 5, kind of escalated quickly, if I'm being honest. ESPN had like this bulky, what was it, top 10 throwdown weekend or something to that effect. But we should have known it was going to be weird when on Friday night, the game between BYU and Akron went so long that Mac Brown needed to leave in the fourth quarter. Did you see that?
Listen, I got to get out of here. Yeah, I guess he was flying to do the studio show the next day. But yeah, his flight was late and that game took forever. But listen, BYU in a big way just keeps getting past. 20 points.
55-53 was your final score.
Yeah.
I guess the quest is now officially dead for what it's worth. But yeah, we had that game on Friday night, which went pretty deep into the night. BYU won 55-53. We also had the Washington romp of Stanford 44-6, which occurred on Friday night, which we'll get to here in just a little bit. But a lot of interesting storylines that have now emerged after we've seen what took place on week 5, and we're going to get into all of that and much, much more. Let's get started with our listener reverbs. 408 Verbal One. A bunch of people dialed in. As you might imagine, folks had a lot to say here. Let's break the ice. Let's get rolling with reverbs, and then we'll jump right in.
Holy Rocky Top Hail Mary, Batman, what a catch! Hey, y'all, this is Will in the mid-coast of Maine.
Hey, it's Andrew from Atlanta, live in Athens, Georgia.
Hi, this is Jesse from Atlanta.
This is Mason calling from Tallahassee. I'm in Doak Campbell Stadium. The game just ended, and I'm going to need a second.
Hey, guys, I just watched Tennessee beat Georgia on a Hail Mary pass. I feel like I'm in a dream right now, but my only question is, do I name my first son Derek Jennings or Juwan Barnett?
Don't know really what to say. I don't understand how you don't kick the ball deep, and I don't understand how you let a receiver undercut you to catch the game-winning touchdown with no time left in the game.
So they just asked Josh Dobbs what he was feeling after the Tennessee-Georgia game, and he said everything. After watching the team go down by double digits in 4 games, I am too. And while I'm grateful, I'd like to feel less terror and rage in the first half.
UNC and Tennessee, oh my God. This is why college football is the greatest game on the freaking planet.
I just watched Florida State lose at the last second. Now it's worse. I'm a UGA grad. I looked at my phone, and we won on a 50-yard touchdown. And then we lost on a 50-yard Hail Mary. Everything hurts. Everything sucks.
I'm sorry, Jackson! Oh, it's for real!
Almost didn't matter so much about the teams and the seasons, but getting to watch Watson versus Jackson is pretty dang cool and something to remember for years to come.
And all congratulations to Clemson for winning the game. But don't rush the field if you're in the top 5.
I'd like to nominate Pat Hayden for America's, nay, the world's greatest living human, for not only not hiring Chris Peterson when he could have, but also hiring Steve Sarkisian away from Washington so that we could hire Chris Peterson. Go Dogs. See you next week, Ducks.
Hey, America. That thud you heard Friday night was Christian McCaffrey's Heisman hopes being run over by the UW hype train.
Go Dogs.
I'm calling to check if there are any tickets available for the Husky Hype Train, and I'm willing to pay extra.
The Washington Huskies have identical margins of victory over Portland State and Stanford.
As an Oregon fan, all I can say is winter is coming.
I see that the Longhorns have brought back the Manny Diaz touch but don't tackle defense.
What was your favorite missed tackle by Texas today?
So after what Wisconsin did to Michigan and Michigan did to Wisconsin, I think we need a new sound effect for the opposite of boat race.
The Indiana Hoosiers had a game-winning shot at the buzzer to knock off the Michigan State Spartans. It's unbelievable, baby!
I was going to call in with some sort of joke about how an overtime winner at home against Minnesota is James Franklin's signature win at Penn State, and then I realized it actually is.
Just got home from the Maryland-Purdue game. DJ Durkin for president.
If last year's Maryland squad was a bowl of cold oatmeal, DJ Durkin's turned them into a spicy omelet filled with chorizo, all the good stuff. 4-0, bring on Penn State.
Kirk Ferentz's new contract is so lucrative, he can afford up to 2 losses per year to the Big Ten seller. Hey, isn't it cool how Jim Harbaugh is taking formation ideas from second-grade teachers?
But my Yellow Jacket Stinger seems to have gotten stuck in this front door cover that we have gifted Miami alumnus Mark Richt and his defense.
Shout out to the Virginia Cavaliers for their first road win in 1,428 days.
I can't believe that Dan was in Yogi's kitchen. I've never been more jealous of Dan in my whole life.
The game-winning goal line stand by Cal is definitely the weirdest thing to happen during the selection.
Dear sons, today we were defeated. We shouldn't have slept on General Trubisky's receiving corps. The massacre will be reviewed on Showtime. Regards, Jimbo Fisher.
All right, there you go.
For a lot of those people, I would recommend going back to sleep this morning.
Go back to sleep.
Just get some extra rest.
So where do we want to start? I feel like the obvious place to start has to be Louisville, Clemson, right?
A game of many different runs and quarters and halves and strengths and weaknesses. But ultimately, Louisville came up literally just a yard short. And that's what really high quality games, and that's what happens in those games. That's what really good offense and really good defense does, and was just from an entertainment standpoint, how great is it to see Death Valley rocking?
Just so cool.
It was wonderful. ESPN did a great job, or ESPN ABC, running through the whole intro and running down the hill and touching Howard's Rock. But it really was, both teams start out pretty slow on offense early. Clemson has the big second quarter and jumps out to the halftime lead. They're up 28-10. Lamar Jackson finds his footing in the second half. He ends up putting up just an otherworldly 400 and some odd total yard day. And the best thing in this game was probably first quarter Clemson defense. Just the way that they were swarming everything he tried to do, but then it could be Lamar Jackson just in general. He is just a magic man.
There's a lot.
I love him.
All right. There's a lot to unpack here. So let's go bit by bit.
Yeah.
To your earlier point about ESPN showing the whole intro, I agree. That was awesome. What I would say, though, is that Clemson needs to fix the eyes of that tiger they have, that mascot. Because you look...
man. 8-ball.
You look into the eyes of the tiger...
Yes.
And it's like looking into the Vigo painting in Ghostbusters 2. Like, I'm afraid something's going to take over my body. Otherwise, yeah, really cool. They certainly did the Clemson experience justice. I watched the first half of this game on mute. And that's not because of any kind of silent protest against Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit. They're both great. But Solid Wife was not feeling well last night. She was a little under the weather, and she wanted some time to chill. And I've actually pulled that move before where you watch part of a game on mute just to try and get a sense for the flow without being influenced by any commentary. This is a chippy first half.
Yeah.
It really jumped out to you on mute how calm Clemson was compared to Louisville. And I get that Louisville had some gripes in the first half, and I understand, okay? But the first half, to me, on mute, it looked like Louisville... The game was going a million miles an hour for them, and in particular, Lamar Jackson. He just lost his cool, and so did Petrino. Second half, much different story. They calmed down. That's a big part of why they were able to make up that, 18-point gap that they had. A much different story in the second half. But for what it's worth, the first half on mute was all Clemson. You're also right to say that this game had a little something for everybody. It was a sloppy game with 8 turnovers, 17 penalties, but it was also sharp and big plays on special teams. And you had the whole comeback and the clutch defense and the 2 dynamic quarterbacks. So much fun to see Watson and Jackson on the same field, to just be able to compare and contrast them in real time. This was not Deshaun Watson's best showing, but again, he's a threat with his legs and he's cool and calm when he has to be. Super cool. Super cool. 2 late touchdown passes in the final 7 minutes of this game, which gave Clemson the win. You compare him to Lamar Jackson. Jackson was more fiery. He wasn't over the top emotional, but he just has a different makeup than Watson. And Lord knows,
comfortable in that moment late too.
Oh my
Lamar
God.
Jackson.
And when he had to, he delivered. He was, I would say, the best player on the field. The difference was that I think Clemson just has the better of the 2 teams. If Lamar Jackson can get his footwork in order, like he's still a little jumpy back there, still throwing a little bit off his back foot. If he can get his footwork rectified, and I'm sure Bobby Petrino will in due time do that, he will be literally unstoppable in college football.
Yeah, and how high must Clemson's ceiling be if that they are surviving a 5 turnover game against a great team like Louisville? That's unbelievable to me. So just a high quality game all around. Deion Kane with a big return to the national stage, and Ben Boulware strangling Lamar Jackson.
Right.
So yeah, this game had it all, like Stefan from SNL would say. And yeah, a shame Louisville had to lose, or Clemson had to lose, but Louisville with a very nice schedule moving forward, which should ultimately put them into position, if they're able to get by Houston late, into an at-large playoff conversation. I don't think it's as possible as certain people say, but I think they'll be in that conversation.
They're in the conversation. They're not out of it altogether. Right. It's
just tough. Their divisional situation is tough.
It's very tough because they need a lot of help to get in front of Clemson now, and I don't think they're going to get that. But certainly still in the conversation. We're going to get to other games around college football, and some other stuff broke and went a little haywire. So you never know what's going to happen. They need to win out and knock off Houston later in the year. But if they can do that, it's doable. Clemson, for their part, they've got a road game against Florida State in a couple weeks, which is still pretty big, even though Florida State might not be what we expected. Mm-hmm. And then probably somebody that can give them a run in the ACC championship game. And I don't know if that's North Carolina or Miami, who's pretty good, or even Virginia Tech, who shouldn't be totally out of the equation at this point, but
they're good.
Looks pretty good for Clemson at this point. I think right now, if I'm looking at a playoff radar, Clemson's got to be in the mix there, right? You've got Clemson, Alabama, probably Ohio State and Washington.
Yeah, a game from Michigan against Wisconsin that you can't take a ton from because of some missed opportunities and failure to open up the offense even a little bit for most of that game. But yeah, I think that's as a top 4. I mean,
yeah,
you want to talk about Houston there? I'm fine with that. You want to talk about Oregon State there? Then you're crazy. You want to talk about Oregon there? You're crazy.
We'll get to Oregon.
Yes. So can we go to the best ending of yesterday?
Yes, please.
And I say best ending as somebody with no rooting interest in this game.
Yeah.
Georgia, Tennessee.
Wow. 2 Hail Marys, back-to-back Hail Marys.
Basically 2 Hail Marys. I mean, it was a longer throw from Jacob Eason with not all that much time left. A really good drive, end of game for Jacob Eason, especially given how much pressure he was under all game because the offensive line's pretty holy nature. And Tennessee just finds a friggin' way to come back. Our pal Ryan Nanny called it emotional whiplash. I think that's pretty accurate. But my goodness, Tennessee, just from the brink. Jawan Jennings, just out of nowhere, coming down with that ball. And I don't know what to make of Tennessee, but I'm kind of happy that they're in the SEC East.
Well, here's what's interesting, okay? And I can only speak to this on a personal level. I have no rooting interest for or against Tennessee.
Or really any college football team at this point.
Or really, I mean, it's just I've got dead eyes at this point.
Yeah.
But Tennessee, given all the preseason hype I think was really easy to hate. And I know, just me, I kind of took a hard line against the Vols, saying, well, you got to prove that you can beat some big teams before I'm willing to give you that kind of benefit of the doubt and christen you as like a national title or even an SEC contender, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's gone on these first couple weeks have taken me from that point of, in a weird way, rooting a little bit against Tennessee to now just openly rooting for them. Because while it might suck to be a Tennessee fan and have to put yourself through this week in and week out, on the flip side, for someone like me, with, again, no real interest for Tennessee, it's just so much fun to watch. They did it again here, Dan. They were down 17 points. You and I were texting about this game and how much Tennessee stinks. And then they crawl back yet again.
They do.
The defense comes to play in the second half. They hold Georgia down on 6 of 8 drives. They dial up the pressure on Eason. They get some plays, right? He throws a late pick. He fumbles in the end zone, which Tennessee falls on for a touchdown. Then you talk about the late game heroics. Tennessee has the lead late, 24-28. Jacob Eason, this bomb to Riley Ridley on a long crossfield pass where Tennessee didn't even think he could throw it that far.
Right.
And he did. And then, of course, you mentioned the Hail Mary from Josh Dobbs to Jawan Jennings, 34-31, they win. They got a big game coming up this week. I think we will find out what Tennessee is made of a little bit more. It's like each and every week we get a little bit more information about the makeup of this Tennessee team. Lord knows at this point they've been challenged mentally, physically. They are proving their case week in, week out, just little by little. This game against A&M, though, next week on the road for Tennessee is, I think, going to be a tester. Like, we're going to know a lot more about them. This is clearly going to be the best defense they've played to this point this season. Between this A&M game and then the Bama game in a couple weeks, we should know almost in totality what we've got with Tennessee before the end of October.
Yeah, Tennessee's not the valedictorian, but they have perfect attendance.
Yeah.
They managed to show up at the end of the game.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've come to play here. And Georgia, I think, again, strengthens the argument we made about Georgia like a week ago. Still a really good team. A lot to like.
Really? Really good is how you describe Georgia?
Still a good team.
Okay.
Still a lot to like.
A lot to like about their schedule coming up, too.
A lot to like about the schedule coming up, but they need to do a lot more before calling them really good is something I'm confident in.
Yeah, they were garbage last week. And moving forward, SEC East isn't all that good. And if they can do anything to improve offensive line play, because they do like the young defense, at times they looked very good against Tennessee. But Georgia in a decent enough place to improve over the course of the season and get Georgia fans excited for 2017.
Let's jump back to a game we referenced before in Michigan and Wisconsin.
Yep.
14-7, your final score here. At one point, we, and by we, I mean you, complimented the Wisconsin defense on the Twitter account, only to be weirdly chastised by a Wisconsin fan.
And Alex, no, I think he covers Wisconsin for one of the recruiting sites or something. But yes, it was very strange.
You complimented Wisconsin's defense, and then the Wisconsin guy jumps in saying, no, I don't want to hear nice things about Wisconsin. This isn't good enough. Maybe it wasn't. I was impressed by Wisconsin's defense as well.
Yeah.
It was the Michigan defense that was the better defense, though. If we're going to compare the two. Yeah, ultimately it was the Michigan defense. And they did exactly what we said in our Wednesday show. They held down Wisconsin. They forced Alex Hornibrook to make some bad decisions. He had 3 interceptions, one of which was a remarkable one-handed catch, by the way, by Jordan Lewis late in the game. He looked like a freshman here. He looked like a freshman. 8 of 25, 88 yards, a touchdown, and 3 picks. He had the look of a kid who, on every snap, he was looking at the defensive line as it rushed him and didn't keep his eyes downfield. Does that sound accurate to you?
That sounds absolutely accurate. And I liked his footwork a little bit in the pocket, and I tweeted something nice about it, and he immediately looked panicked right after that.
Yeah.
But yeah, Michigan constantly and consistently swarmed him and the Wisconsin rushing attack and left points on the field offensively. And that's something that they need to improve upon, because as a top 5 team, and a team that, while Wilton Speight looked a little bit closer to average yesterday, they need to find more creative ways to get the ball downfield because it just wasn't happening against a good Wisconsin defense. And I think both teams are going to be fine, all things considered. I know Wisconsin still has a pretty brutal schedule. I'm going to pull it up momentarily. But yes, the thing is with these types of teams like Michigan is, you have those survive and advance weeks against good team, even if you don't look complete. So guess what? Wisconsin in 2 weeks, they have a bye week this coming Saturday, has Ohio State.
Yeah.
Coming off of Michigan State and Michigan, and then Iowa, who, listen, 2015 was a hell of a ride, Iowa. And then Nebraska, Northwestern, the surging Northwestern Wildcats.
Yeah, how about it?
And then it empties out a little bit from there. So Wisconsin's going to be fine. The fact that it is first-year defense taking Justin Wilcox over for Dave Aranda, I like everything that's happening. Michigan is going to improve, but necessary win for Michigan. That's the best thing I can say.
A necessary win, yeah. They need to improve offensively. You mentioned they left some points out there. They missed 3 field goals, which is something they're going to need to get sorted out pretty quickly. Don't know if there are any other options on the bench for Michigan in the kicking game, but even still,
not really, no.
Even still a pretty sound defensive effort for the Wolverines. The defense is clearly the best part of that team, and it is what's going to keep them in games like this where, let's be honest, the offense can't get a whole lot going, but the defense is just so good that it's going to suppress whatever offense is coming in the other direction. So good win for Michigan. For all intents and purposes, headed on a collision course now with Ohio State later in the year. That's really what this comes down to. Ohio State won 58-0 over Rutgers. They rushed for over 400 yards. They outgained Rutgers by 553 yards, which is the largest advantage, I believe, in the Urban Meyer era. They've got a weird one next week against Indiana, which I don't know if you saw, but knocked off Michigan State.
Not only did they knock off Michigan State, but they did it as what, Ty?
I believe they did it, and they finally we had a team who took seriously being Yakko's home dog of the week.
The Yakko's home dog of the week.
Also, for those wondering, it's YOCCO''S. We've seen many creative spellings for Yakko's, but that's how it's spelled. YOCCO''S. This one went to overtime. Indiana won 24-21. Went to OT. Indiana holds Michigan State to a 49-yard field goal attempt on the first series in overtime. They miss. Then Indiana gets the ball back. They miss a kick of their own, which would have won it, but they got another shot at it because someone on Michigan State got pegged for leaping. This time they kick basically an extra point through to win the game. This is the kind of game where if you're a Michigan State fan, you're going to look at it and say, we blew it. And Indiana's not that good. And look, I've been there. I've done that. I don't necessarily disagree, but at least give Indiana props for a second.
Oh, yeah.
They have kind of been the rich man's Colorado ever since Kevin Wilson took over. Like, everyone's rooting for them, and it just feels like they should be better than they are, and everyone's rooting for progress. This might be the breakout year, if only because it seems like they've improved a great deal on the defensive side of the football. They're not beating Ohio State or Michigan, but if you're asking, can they beat Nebraska? Can they beat Penn State? I'll tell you right now, I know they can beat Penn State. They're good enough to beat Penn State. It could happen. This is a much better team at this point than I think we expected. Secretly decent Indiana. SDI, baby.
Yeah, they're getting big performances. I mean, Ricky Jones had a big play day. It's Tigray Scales. He's in backfields everywhere. So they're getting those players to consistently come up big. And Michigan State is probably still the bigger story here just because they were a playoff team last year. Just look discombobulated. Clock management, play calling, the timeouts. It feels like something is just off in East Lansing. And I'm not exactly sure what it is with the coaching staff, but they were in a position to win and then led Indiana back into this game, and good for Indiana, driving lengths of the field multiple times. But I don't know, something's just off about Michigan State, and it's meant as no disrespect, Ty, but they're not particularly good right now.
Yeah, I was going to make the joke that Notre Dame came in like a wrecking ball this year and may subsequently ruin both Texas and Texas's own perception of itself and Michigan State. That's at least two teams that it's going to fell in one fell swoop. Because Texas now, fell victim to Oklahoma State. And after beating Notre Dame, everyone thought they were on top of the world.
Mm-hmm.
As it were, they were not. The defense still had a ton of work to do, which I'm not sure I fully understand. But now in giving up 49 points to Oklahoma State, people are starting to ask the question about Charlie Strong and whether or not this is his do or die season. And that's great for me because I have them in the fantasy things draft.
Notre Dame's secret, evil body blow team.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody's cool after playing Notre Dame. You get Notre Dame stink on you, and something just affects you in the way you play football afterwards. Texas, immediately downhill. Michigan State, immediately downhill. Duke lost to damn Virginia.
It's like dating Rihanna. Right?
Yeah. Only bad things come of it. So, oh well. Don't play Notre Dame. Notre Dame is FBS North Dakota State. Just don't play them.
Don't play
for completely different reasons.
Very quickly, I did mention this game. It's Oklahoma State 49, Texas 31. It shouldn't come as any surprise that Texas gave up a bunch of yards to Oklahoma State because Oklahoma State plays offense. They got one of the best quarterbacks in the game. They got a good offense, a little more balance than I think you might expect because they're running the football better. And this game was in Stillwater. So please don't anyone pretend like this was a great situation for Texas. But it is really jolting to give up 47 to Notre Dame, to give up 50 to Cal, now 49 to Oklahoma State, especially considering that this defense was supposed to be the strength of the team. Now the drumbeat is growing louder. Charlie Strong this, Vance Bedford that. Texas is 2-2, Dan. They've got Oklahoma next week. They've got Baylor. They've got TCU. There's also Iowa State in there, which put up a ton of points against Baylor. You've got Texas Tech, which can score. You got West Virginia, which is on the secretly decent list that we have here, that I have. With this defense, you could see 3 more losses. It's not unforeseeable. So I guess the question now is, at what point does Texas decide that the whole Charlie Strong thing isn't working?
Not during the season, apparently.
Yeah.
Listen, I told you, I've said it many times, 100% of the time, I'm either right or wrong. And you were high on Texas's defense before the season started, and this was part of my 100% being right or wrong, was not.
Yeah.
And they tried a lot of different things. Charlie Strong took over defensive play calling in the second half, and that actually was an improvement. But their secondary kept getting worked, and it didn't help that both of their running backs got hurt to control things on the ground. But so let's see. So it was last October 31st that Texas got blanked by Iowa State, correct?
Yeah.
I was going to find the number of days since Texas has scored a point against Iowa State, and they'll do it this year, but it's been a long time, and Texas is just, they're floundering. I mean, missing extra points, one of which is brought back, and rushing for over 300 yards, not turning the ball over a ton. Did you watch the end of this game?
I did, yeah.
They were down 18 with 4.5 minutes left, and you're like, well, 3-possession game. You got to go into a fast offense. You got to go downfield. You got to keep moving. You got to play with tempo. It's a Sterling Gilbert offense that is built to play with tempo. They're down 18 against a bad pass defense. And granted, it's not like the Texas offense was great yesterday, but they were getting defensive stop after defensive stop. And they punted on 4th down from midfield. I mean, it was whatever it was.
It's that Brian Kelly stink is what it is. He pulled the same move a couple weeks ago.
Brian Kelly stink. He has the strings being pulled on every single team. I don't know what it is, but wow, to just give up and play field position at that point has to be just insanely maddening if you're a Texas fan, because it's college football. Nothing is out of sight. It's okay. These are 19-year-olds who are going to screw up on defensive assignments. It's not like Oklahoma State plays lockdown D, and Oklahoma State went conservative and immediately ran the ball and punted. And so Texas basically traded 4.5 minutes down 18 for 2.5 minutes down 18 at the same place.
Yeah.
It was, man, Tom Herman made a bunch of money yesterday.
Well, here's what's funny about that. LSU did really well in their debut for Ed Orgeron. They put up a ton of yards. I think the most yards in school history against an SEC team or since they joined the SEC. Some weird stat.
And by the way, before we go into LSU, Justice Hill, great day for Oklahoma State on the ground. Mason Rudolph, an incredible day through the air, throwing for almost 400 yards, 14 per attempt. Junkyard Jim Washington goes down with concussion symptoms after a big hit, and he's knocked out cold. We hope he recovers quickly. Jalen McCleskey, a very nice day for Oklahoma State. Not to take anything away from Oklahoma State. It's
not
an
at all.
Electric first half, and they were able to hang on. Good for the Cowboys after just a hugely disappointing start to the season because of that Chippewa game.
Yeah, they should be undefeated right now. Oklahoma State's a good football team. Where I'm going, though, you mentioned Tom Herman.
Yes. Sorry, continue.
LSU had a nice game, albeit against a Missouri team that isn't exactly top rung of the SEC, but a decent team. I'm curious to see what happens now if things keep unraveling at Texas. I want to see if we get a nice little arms race on our hands here. Because even though Texas is publicly saying, no, we're not going to make a move on him mid-season, Charlie Strong, right? If, in fact, it looks like LSU is going to make a play for Tom Herman, does it then behoove Texas to make that move and throw their hat in the sweepstakes a little earlier than expected?
Well, Texas' season ends November 25th, regular season. That's pretty early. Is that Thursday, Friday I think that might be Friday of Thanksgiving week. I don't have a calendar in front of me. So that still gives them plenty of time. I don't think LSU is going to be making a move in terms of hiring somebody or beginning to talk maybe through back channels during the season. And I think you may have undersold LSU's win against Missouri a little bit. That was a great win. All things considered, the distraction of firing a coach, an iconic LSU coach at this point, like Les Miles, the national championship winning coach on Sunday, and to come out like they did yesterday. And Missouri's fine. They're not a particularly good or even great team, but they're decent enough. And just to flatten, to squash both of Missouri's lines, the LSU offensive line, Demetrius Geis, and I mentioned this earlier on Wake Up College Football. If Leonard Fournette has a 99 rating, Demetrius Geis is like 95. The drop-off there is essentially non-existent. He did a great job north-south. The cutbacks were there.
Yeah.
LSU's offensive line was great. Their defensive line completely swarmed and improved Missouri offense, and LSU just looked so much more ahead of whatever Missouri tried to do, and that's where they should be given the talent level. So I would A+ opening game for LSU, all things considered, with Ed Orgeron.
42-7 was the final. LSU was fired up for this one.
Yeah.
And I think that's the story. Not so much the fact that they won by the margin that they did, but here we go, right? LSU gets into the meat of their schedule next week on the road at Florida. They still got games against Ole Miss and Alabama, which both of those are at home. They've got road games against Arkansas and A&M. What is the minimum threshold then for retaining a guy like an Ed Orgeron? What do you need to do?
He probably has to run the table and see early, really good returns in recruiting, although anybody should be able to succeed recruiting Louisiana if they're coaching LSU. But there needs to be a degree of confidence. Like he might need to beat Alabama. Yeah. If I'm saying run the table, he's going to have to beat Alabama, but he is going to have to be so impressive, and the staff around him is going to have to testify on his behalf that they want to retain, whether it's Dave Aranda, whoever it is, that working with him is a dream. He obviously knows the area. He's local. So he still will need to go above and beyond, because I'm not sure that hiring Ed Orgeron is going to be the first choice of a fan base and a group of boosters who expect year in and year out contention for the SEC West. But he has head coaching experience. He has interim head coaching experience now at two big spots in USC and LSU. I think he's a very serious candidate, but he has to do very serious things the rest of the year, which is not impossible, but we're still talking about doing very serious things with Danny Etling, which,
Purdue takeover, baby.
Don't know about.
Purdue takeover.
Yeah. So I'd put it at about 31% chance he's the head coach next year.
That's a pretty good chance.
Pretty good.
It's a pretty good chance. All
60, right. What is it? 69 for the field?
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay. We got to go back in time to Friday. There are Washington fans listening to this show.
Yeah.
Chanting disrespect, Dan.
March to 15.
So, look, the final score here was 44-6.
Just got murdered.
This game was not even close. Right from the jump, if you watched it, I watched this one afterwards on YouTube, the good old 30-minute thing, 30-minute trick, find one of them clips illegally. Washington had the advantage right from the jump. They were great along the lines. Their defensive line disrupted Stanford all game. Their offensive line gave Jake Browning all day to throw the football. I was blown away by how much better Washington looked in this football game. I can't imagine anyone out there didn't come away just wholeheartedly impressed by how dominant the Huskies were here.
Literally everything clicked. Literally everything went, not that it went Washington's way as if it were a lucky thing. Washington executed everything they tried to do exactly how they wanted it to be done. And that from Jake Browning all the way down or all the way up, because that defensive line might have been the best thing in this game. They held Stanford, Christian McCaffrey Stanford, 30 carries for 29 yards. That includes sacks. But even still, they held Christian McCaffrey to 49 yards on 4 yards per carry. But Washington held Stanford, again, 7 yards per carry or non-pass attempt.
Wow.
Or, yes, non-thrown pass. To put that into words that you and I can understand, if you line up 2 Subway footlongs, that was every carry for Stanford. They had something like 8 sacks, 10 tackles for loss, and that was bringing almost no pressure. I don't think any of their sacks were bringing pressure. It was all just the 4-man defensive line base. And a stat, again, our pal Ryan Nanny mentioned this morning on Wake Up College Football, I think Washington only had 1 3-and-out. And Washington already has a really, really good defense. But you give them rest, you give them a chance to breathe before going back out and playing against a tough Stanford offensive line, traditionally speaking, and Christian McCaffrey and a generally on-target Ryan Burns, and they're an impossible defense. And you're right, from go, Washington was pure greatness, and the receivers looked really good. John Ross, Dante Pettis, Chico McClatcher. Washington is the clear, complete class alliteration of the Pac-12.
Let me ask you this. I'm going to go through Washington's remaining schedule.
Please do.
I want you to tell me the percentage chance that Washington loses each of these games. At Oregon.
3. And that's if Oregon's true freshman, Justin Herbert, plays out of his mind and is fearless and just connects on a bunch of deep balls.
Home against Oregon State.
99.8.
Okay, so you're saying 99.8 chance of losing?
Sorry, 0.02.
Okay. At Utah.
27.
At Cal.
37.
Home against USC.
30.
Home against ASU.
15.
At Washington State.
35.
40. So it's looking pretty good for Washington.
Yeah, they'll be favored considerably in each of these games. At Utah's always weird. That is, if I were to circle anything, even with their loss against Cal on a defensive stand of all things from Cal.
Yeah.
Even with that very strange loss, going to Utah and winning, no matter how good you are, is just, it's tricky. They are just a landmine a mile high.
The games that scare me the most here, I think, are on the road at Cal, and maybe at Washington
USC looked
State.
really good yesterday.
USC looked pretty good, but there's a lot to be desired there as well. Before this week, I would have been inclined to say Oregon and ASU, but both of those teams were so underwhelming just because of the style of play. Like we saw when they went to Arizona.
True.
That spread offense wasn't something that Washington is necessarily built to defend that well.
Mobile quarterbacks, yeah.
Sure. So, Oregon, Arizona State, they kind of run that system. You never know. Well, both had an underwhelming performance in week 5. We'll see what happens now moving forward. But if I'm looking at it from afar, the Cal game on the road, the Washington State game, the Apple Cup game later in the year could be interesting. And certainly USC, if they can get it all together, they're an interesting case as well. But this is all a long way of saying that it looks pretty good for Washington at this juncture.
Yes. Let's talk about teams that had less in the way of defense than Washington, or maybe even Stanford. TCU Oklahoma.
Ooh, okay.
Big 12 as we move there. TCU Oklahoma was interesting. TCU goes up early, I think 21-7. Oklahoma crawls their way back, and then TCU, through some huge passing, crawls their way back, but ultimately Oklahoma holds on to win this game in
I believe this would be what we consider a shootout. Thank you for queuing me up there. Yeah, this was a lot of points in this one, Dan.
Yes.
What is your read on both of these teams at this point?
Oklahoma is probably looking better with Baylor's struggles than any other Big 12 team. Jerry's a little bit still out on undefeated West Virginia. Like to see them against better competition, but they did enough to get back and then beat Kansas State yesterday. And TCU is just going to be indistinguishable from Texas Tech.
They're the same team, right?
Slightly better defensively.
Better defensively, I think better in terms of uniforms, and that might be about it. They cannot play defense. For my money, their defense has been one of the biggest disappointments in college football this year.
Yeah. There's so many wasted stars this year. Taj Williams sort of wasted in his effort. Goes for over 200 yards. Yeah, a lot of bad defenses.
Sometimes there's just so much scoring that it's tough to take anything away.
Right.
And it's good to see Oklahoma's offense with a consistent, balanced attack, even if it's against a bad defense, because, I don't know, early going so far this year, I just wasn't sure what this offense was going to be. I remember in the Houston game, right? I think it was you brought up the point, like, was it some sort of indignant air raid mentality? Like they're going to keep throwing the football, even though they're ripping off 6 yards a carry.
Right.
What was going on there? Who knows? At least now we saw more of a consistent, balanced attack against TCU. And that's good. I think that's a good thing because Oklahoma certainly has the horses to pull it off.
And you know what? Oklahoma stopped TCU on the ground.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be overlooked. They didn't stop them all that much through the air. But Oklahoma did enough defensively. They weathered their own turnovers, lost a couple fumbles, and it's a step forward. Even though they gave up 46 points, it was only 24 into the fourth quarter. And yes, it was down, but it was big plays. It's not like TCU was driving consistently down the field after that big first quarter. And listen, it's not a great way to describe a defense, but it's a step and good for Oklahoma.
All right. Before we get to other games, Dan.
Yeah.
I know you did some wedding planning this weekend.
I did do some wedding planning.
Did you figure out the suit thing yet?
I did not, but the Solid Fiance was told by a coworker of hers, shout out to Brian, that I was thinking to go dark navy suit.
Oh.
And I have not done anything since mentioning that on the show on Wednesday.
See, because this could be a source of tension here. If she's got like a dress idea and things kind of picked out on that side.
True. No, I think we'll be fine.
All right. Well, listen, I've said it before, Indochino.
Yeah.
Indochino, Indochino. It's pronounced Indochino. It is one of the largest made-to-measure menswear brands anywhere out there in the world. They are making it easy for guys to get a great fitting, high-quality suit, and shirts for that matter, at an incredible price. I had a few people ask me, is this deal for real? Yeah, it's for real. I got it in front of me. Here's how it works. Go to Indochino.com, Indochino.com, or drop by one of their 9 North American showrooms. You can pick from hundreds of fabrics and patterns, pick all sorts of customizations from lapels to pleats to jacket linings and much, much more. All you got to do is pick what you want and submit your measurements. Then just kick back and relax, chill. Get ready to step into the best, most stylish suit you've ever worn. And you're going to get it in just 4 weeks, Dan. 4 weeks. Right now, all you got to do, if you're listening, you can get any premium Indochino suit for just $389 at Indochino.com when you enter the code SOLID at checkout. That's 50% off the regular price for a made-to-measure premium suit. Shipping is always free, your satisfaction guaranteed, or your money back. Again, it's Indochino.com, Indochino.com. Promo code SOLID, any premium suit for $389 and free shipping. You'll never have to worry about badly fitting suits or expensive trips to the tailor ever again. Get ready, Dan Rubenstein, to look like $1 million.
Oh man, can't wait.
All right, where are we going next?
That's a good question. You know what? Let's go to the ACC. I know we're bouncing around a bit, but Miami used 2 very timely turnovers early on, fumble recoveries off of Georgia Tech to have a nice complete win. Brad Kaya looked pretty good in spots. They're able to run the ball pretty consistently, Miami, and weather an always tricky Georgia Tech offense, which did move the ball some, especially in the middle of the game. And that sets up Miami at 4-0 going against Florida State, I believe, this coming week.
Yeah. It's a big game.
So Miami just sort of lurking, waiting for their kick down the final stretch of, October. But Miami in the coming weeks, the next 4 or 5 weeks, it gets a lot more difficult with Florida State, North Carolina, Virginia Tech, And, well, I guess then Notre Dame. But in the next 3 weeks, things get pretty tricky for Miami. And even though the competition hasn't been great, curious to see how Miami responds with very good-looking defense.
Yeah, see,
a balanced offense. Yeah.
This is what I was hoping you'd bring up. Bill Connolly, who, by the way, got some love on the CBS broadcast yesterday.
Nice.
I'm sure you saw that.
Yeah.
But according to his Havoc numbers, which, I love, this is a playmaking defense for Miami. And it's something that we're not accustomed to seeing at Miami. Like, back in the day of Miami, in the late 90s and early 2000s and even the late 80s, this was a thing for Miami, a routine thing. The defense was just unstoppable. But we haven't seen that in a while, and especially in the Al Golden era, the Miami defense was just a sieve. It ain't no thing. Just go out there and line up and run all over Miami. So far this season, according to Bill's numbers now, Miami has the best defensive line in the country.
And not the first time Miami's gotten off to a quick start and increased expectations recently.
No, it isn't.
That is not a new thing. This is not a new thing.
So is Miami secretly decent now? Are they on the secretly decent list?
I think so. They're a top 15 team. It's not too much of a secret.
So they're not on the list. Well, I'm going to take them off.
I don't think so. No, they're pretty clearly decent.
I've got Cal, Colorado, Indiana, Maryland, and West Virginia on the secretly decent list right now.
So I believe Colorado is atop the Pac-12 South at the moment.
Yep.
They're only lost to Michigan after starting that game off in a strong way. Review everybody else. I heard Cal.
Cal should be on there, right?
I think so.
Indiana obviously just beat Michigan State in overtime.
Yeah.
Maryland, who's still undefeated.
4-0.
Big game against
Huge
Penn
win.
State this week.
Yep.
And then West Virginia, who eked one out over K-State, but still a team no one's talking about, and I don't know if anyone expected a whole lot from this year.
Western Michigan still undefeated. Row that boat. PJ Fleck. I'm saying the secretly decent list after week 5. I think Toledo, even with the loss, I think that was their first loss.
I mean, these
to
are some
BYU.
deep cuts here. If you want me to add Toledo and Western Michigan,
These are they're deeper cuts. I think North Carolina's gotten a little bit lost after week 1, but they are 2-0 in the ACC and 4-1. And I think it's much more secretly really good, North Carolina, because they're unranked and they just won a huge game against Florida State, which we can talk about momentarily as we're on the ACC. I think Nebraska right now, even though they're a top 15, they're playing sort of under the radar.
We need to draw a hard line though on this secretly decent versus secretly good versus like surprisingly decent. There's so many different S words that we could use here, to fit the bill. But let's stay true to form.
Okay,
Secretly
unranked teams
decent.
that are secret have to be unranked. Yeah.
So Cal, Colorado, Indiana,
Maryland,
and West Virginia.
Okay, I'm good with that.
All right, and Toledo and Western Michigan,
down.
we can those. That's like the extended play version of the secretly decent list.
Okay.
All right, now let's go back to what happened to Florida State here.
I'm also going to try to ride for Air Force later on, but continue.
Air Force, okay. North Carolina 36, FSU 34. Nick Weiler hammers a 54-yard field goal at the gun to give the Tar Heels a huge road win here at Florida State. It ends the longest home winning streak in the nation at 22 for Florida State. The Noles went down early, 21-0. First half, they claw their way back. They grab the lead late on that sick little duck under by DeAndre Francois, who dove in for a touchdown. He gave him a 34-33 lead. He put up numbers. Dalvin Cook put up numbers and 3 touchdowns. It was just that Carolina's offense was humming. And, they still can't get Elijah Hood going, but I don't know if they need to, so long as General Mitch Trubisky is looking as outstanding as he is. He went over 400 in this game, had 3 more touchdowns. The most telling number, though, might be that he went 31 of 38. And he just he picked apart the Florida State defense, Dan.
Yeah, it's tough to beat a good offense when you can't generate pressure and your secondary looks lost. That's tough. So the fact that Florida State only lost by a couple, and the fact that DeAndre Francois probably at this point, it's not his strength to sort of sit back in the pocket and read through his progressions. They have succeeded most when they roll him out, when they move the pocket, when they take advantage of his athleticism and get him comfortable throwing on the run, which they did in the second half. That was a big difference maker. Dalvin Cook, another nice day, but there were periods where he was a non-factor but came out strong in the second half. Bobo Wilson, another strong day, but yeah, Mitch Trubisky is just, to me, by the way,
General Mitch Trubisky.
See, I was going to say he sounds like a foreman Like, oh, that's Mitch Trubisky. He's been in the Union for about 15 years. But okay, General Mitch Trubisky. General Trubisky. Trubisky sounds very generally.
I have a lot of sounds that I need to make. I need to make General Trubisky. I need to make the Baby Buckeyes. I need to make an 18-wheeler sound, which I promised a while ago.
Right.
Before that falls out of favor with the listing public. There are a couple other ones here that I've jotted down, so I need to get cracking this week. I promise. This week I'm going to do it. But Trubisky looks great. He really, truly looks great. He's been a revelation for North Carolina. On the Florida State side, I don't know if you saw that Jimbo Fisher, he blamed himself for poor execution and
poor teaching. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, the loss to Louisville was a shock to the system. This was unexpected. I can see losing to Louisville in hindsight, but this one was unexpected. Still, it's not like North Carolina is not a good team. This is a good team. Florida State's still a good team. They might not be as good as we thought, but it's not like Florida State's losing to, Syracuse or Georgia.
Oh man, hold on. I'm gonna capture that sound.
Okay.
I'm gonna auto-tune you.
You get my point, though.
Yes,
you get my point. They're not losing to bad teams. They're still a good team. They've got that game against Miami next week, which is a rivalry game that should tell us a little bit more about both sides. But also worth noting now, Carolina's in a terrible letdown look-ahead spot.
Oh, look at that sandwich. I'm so hungry.
Oh, boy.
A terrible letdown look-ahead sandwich spot next week against Virginia Tech because you beat Florida State on the road, this huge emotional roller coaster. You nail a giant field goal at the gun. You're running up and down the field doing the tomahawk chop thing, right? Just to try and rub it all in. And now you got to go back home against Virginia Tech, who can play. And then you got to go on the road yourself to play in Miami.
Yeah.
Just saying.
If they get through the middle of October, if they beat Virginia Tech at home, they go to Miami, which hasn't been the most difficult place to play recently. They can cruise. I mean, it's Virginia, Georgia Tech at home. They go to Duke, which is not particularly good. They have the Citadel and they have North Carolina State at home. So, as we should all be aware, North Carolina can come out to start the season and look kind of dumpy and then run the table. And Mitch Trubisky, as you've mentioned, General Mitch Trubisky.
Yep.
To see what he looked like in week one with the sort of panic and trepidation to throw downfield to where he is now, especially just how calm he was in that fourth quarter, it speaks to both the coaching and his ability to just take a second and hey, the game is slowing down. Really like what he's been able to do in these successive weeks.
Here's what I'm going to do because we're both busy.
Yeah.
I'm going to outsource General Mitch Trubisky
okay.
as a sound. Email it to us at solidverbal@gmail.com. I'm also going to outsource 18-wheeler.
Oh, nice.
So if we get multiples for Texas, the 18-wheeler package.
Still? Okay.
It's still a thing.
Okay.
We'll play different sounds depending on what we get. But I'll take a crack at General Mitch. Other people can as well as the 18-wheeler.
Nice.
All right. While we're on the subject of the ACC, Pitt won over Marshall. NC State wins over Wake. Virginia beats Duke.
Man.
In a letdown spot for the Blue Devils. And Boston College wins 35-3. Notre Dame beat Syracuse 50-33. Did you watch any of this game?
Yeah, it was on a muted screen, so it was sort of on and off. I saw a lot of Syracuse running all over Notre Dame's kickoff coverage, I think.
Oh, gosh.
Was that a thing?
Yeah.
And I saw Sean Kaiser throw some nice balls, and I think that was pretty much, that's all that really stood out to me.
Look, Notre Dame has no defense. They are a glitzier version of Texas Tech this year. Just accept it. They've already got 3 losses. They're glitzier. It's Notre Dame.
Yeah.
They got their own network, all right? They could have thrown deep on Syracuse all game. For what it's worth, Cuse could have done the same. They just made a few more mistakes in this one. I will just say this. I'm not going to try and trump up Notre Dame. They win 50-33. It's going to be like this all year for them. There has been a lot of hype around Deshaun Kaiser being potentially the first quarterback off the board in the upcoming NFL draft. I am not in disagreement that he has that kind of talent. He needs to stop missing throws. If you said you saw a few of the nice ones, there were nice ones. But even though he was 23 of 35, which isn't bad, there are definitely scenarios in this young season where you can look at what Kaiser's done and say he's throwing to the right guys, but he's not accurate enough. He needs to take that step as a quarterback if he wants to be that first quarterback off the board.
I would happily take Deshaun Kaiser's misses.
A lot of teams would. All right. And you're splitting hairs with him. He's a good quarterback. He's got all the tools, physical and otherwise. But if he wants to absolutely be the first quarterback off the board, if he can improve his accuracy from this point forward, that will make him a much, much more attractive prospect in the NFL.
It should be worth noting Logan Woodside in a losing effort, 505, 5 touchdowns.
Do you want to play the sound for him?
Please. Yeah. I mean, shout out a great performance.
Here, let's play the sound for him. Indeed. All right. Where are we going next?
Quickly, Patrick Mahomes, just speaking of in a losing effort, Texas Tech wins, but he is just a losing effort guy because he's so good every week. He hurts his shoulder, and that is rough. I think it's his throwing shoulder after he took a huge hit Thursday night against Kansas. I don't know if there's anything you want to add about that game, but
nope.
That was also the night of Houston running roughshod over Connecticut in a revenge spot, and your beloved Bob Diaco. He's a beautiful man, beautiful head of hair.
Yep.
But Greg Ward with a huge game. I only saw a little bit of this game. Alabama with a bit of a crock potting.
Yeah.
I would say against Kentucky. They started slow, but slowly built up a lead. Some struggles in sustaining drives, but Jalen Hurts ultimately doesn't throw it away, gets enough both through the air and has a couple nice plays on the ground. And an uglier day for Alabama, but it helps to have Calvin Ridley. It always does.
Let me go back to Big 12 territory for a second. I should mention that Kansas did have 19 points.
That's true.
A 19-point showing. I love it. I look for it every week. What happened with Baylor and Iowa State? This is one of those games where if you're not watching it on TV, and if you're just kind of scoreboard tracking on your computer or your iPad or your iPhone.
I had this on actually most of the second half.
You keep refreshing the scoreboard to see if something's wrong. And it's not changing, or it's changing just not at the rate you'd expect. Baylor wins by 3, 45-42. If my calculations are correct, Iowa State scored on 6 of its first 7 possessions, and the only possession in which they did not score was due to them taking a knee to end the first half. So this was not an inspired Baylor effort on the defensive side of the ball. Their defense did get better in the fourth quarter, and they have actually not allowed any points in the fourth quarter of the season, which I was surprised to learn.
Nice stat.
But it doesn't leave me feeling terribly confident that they needed to turn it on to eke one out against Iowa State.
Yeah, especially given that they ran so successfully, especially in the second half, which they needed. But they ran for like 450, 460 yards.
469,
469, eked out a win last second with the field goal in Ames. Defense was just, especially the secondary, they weren't getting pressure on Lanning for a good chunk of that game. There were big gaps in the secondary as Lanning was passing all over them. And without Katie Cannon, who was out, I think, with a groin injury, Seth Russell looked pretty pedestrian, at least within the context of recent Baylor offenses. And it's especially weird considering how well they're able to run the ball. You just figure Iowa State would have to devote so many resources to defending the run, but they just couldn't get going downfield for the majority of this game. And Baylor comes back. They still put up 45 points. As you mentioned, they shut Iowa State out in the fourth quarter, but encouraging, I suppose, for Matt Campbell that they're able to hang so many points and stay with a team like that, but just brutal that 17 unanswered lost them the game in the fourth quarter. But yeah, I don't know what the term would be for Baylor at this point. Secretly average, undefeated? Don't know.
All right.
At this point.
Let's go back to the Big Ten.
Let's.
The best conference in college football.
This is true.
Penn State wins in overtime over Minnesota. This is a back and forth game. Tyler Davis.
You're just talking Joey Julius style.
Yeah, Joey
back
Julius
and forth
style.
Game for him.
He got laid out here on a cheap shot. A Minnesota guy got booted for that one.
Yep. Is he all right?
I think he's okay.
Okay, good.
Tyler Davis from Penn State, he drills a 40-yarder. In the waning seconds, he ties it at 23-all. They go to overtime, then Saquon Barkley runs for a touchdown. They end up winning the game. I am not a huge fan of Trace McSorley.
Okay.
I've said it a bunch of times now, but he's got grit. And it's worth noting
Oh, man.
I'm trying to be diplomatic here. I've done nothing but make fun of his arm all year. I got to give him credit for this.
Well, do you think he wanted to complete half of his passes against Minnesota? Do you think the desire was there?
The desire was there.
Okay, good.
Just 19 of 40, one more would have got him over.
Yeah.
But didn't do much on third downs either. But he didn't turn the ball over. And there were a few plays in this game where Penn State needed something, and he gave it to him. Whether it's a huge play running on Penn State's final drive or a timely pass at some point in the game that, they need it. He's able to kind of dial up those big plays. And I do feel like he's getting better. That's something for Penn State. This offense, to me, feels like it's getting better. This was not the kind of win that's going to quiet the people who are calling for James Franklin's head, especially after getting throttled a week ago to Michigan. But the defense is just so banged up right now. And that's on top of all the attrition that they're already dealing with in the front seven. To get any kind of win against a decent team like a Minnesota squad, this was a good thing for Penn State, even if it took them to overtime to do it.
It was 100% necessary.
It was 100% necessary.
All right. I don't have many. I didn't watch this game. I apologize, but I just couldn't.
Yeah, that's okay.
Northwestern beat Iowa. I did watch a little bit of this game.
How did this happen?
Boy. Northwestern is fine, I guess. Clayton Thorson was pretty good. Didn't turn the ball over. Found the end zone a bunch. Didn't throw downfield all that much. But Northwestern ran the ball down Iowa's throat. And Iowa, I think, really misses. Well, first of all, they didn't protect C.J. Beathard all that well. And they really miss Matt Vandenberg, just like that safety outlet that they've had for so many years, both in him and some other receivers, and just couldn't get things going. And this was on mute, so this was sort of looking back and forth a little bit as it got later on into the game. But man, Northwestern, good for the Wildcats. Did not see this coming.
Yeah, 6 sacks in this game for the Cats.
Yeah, they have one.
They owned Iowa's line in this game.
They have, what's his name? It's difficult to say, right? It's Ifeadi Odenagbo.
Sure.
He's borderline unblockable. Really fun to watch him play. And Iowa struggled with him the entire game.
Yeah, all due credit to Northwestern. Nice win here. This is also a really bad loss for Iowa, which gave Kirk Ferentz an extension a few weeks ago and then proceeded to lose to North Dakota State and now Northwestern. Not a good look.
Not great, no.
Maryland won again. They're 4-0. They're on the road next week against Penn State.
Winnable.
Definitely winnable.
Winnable. Maryland, let's see how their schedule's looking. Because at a certain point, with our teams playing how they are, we like seeing coaches that come on our show succeed. They have Penn State, Minnesota. I'd say both are winnable.
Yep.
Michigan State, a lot more winnable than it looked a couple weeks ago. On the road at Indiana and on the road against Michigan, definitely tougher. Ohio State at home, at Nebraska, and Rutgers. So
10-2 Maryland?
No. But they will, 8-4. If they could finish 4-3 if they lose to Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State. Even if they go 3-4 from this point, 7-5 in year one.
Not bad.
Pretty nice.
Not bad.
Pretty nice. Also, tale of 2 former Urban Meyer assistants, Chris Ash and DJ Durkin. Very different directions right now in their first year in the Big Ten as head coaches.
All right. Nebraska 31, Illinois 16. Nebraska, another team off to a quiet, hot start. 5-0. More of a fight on their hands in this game than I think we expected. If Illinois would have converted a few more Nebraska turnovers for touchdowns instead of field goals, if they didn't make stupid penalties, this one could have gone in their favor. It didn't, but Nebraska was put to a test. Terrell Newby with a big fourth quarter really put Nebraska on his back, gave them a boost when they needed it the most. Hopefully Jordan Westerkamp is okay. I saw he went to the hospital after he took a shot in the back.
Yeah.
They are on bye next week before going to Indiana and then coming home against Purdue. So they got some time to lick their wounds. They're a nicked up team just in general. Now might be the right time to talk to your kids about a 7-0 Nebraska going to Wisconsin on Halloween weekend.
Who do they have leading up to that?
Purdue and Indiana.
Oh yeah, Purdue and Indiana. Yeah, it's not unreasonable to say.
All right. Where else do we want to go here? Should we talk a little bit about Texas A&M and South Carolina? Did anyone watch this game?
We should. I watched some of this game. South Carolina had chances to really ugly up this game even more than they already did, with Texas A&M play calling a little bit weird, and Texas A&M down Ricky Seals-Jones, Speedy Noyle, and Myles Garrett. So Texas A&M certainly not at full strength, but A&M did enough. They ran it enough. They got enough stops. This defense is filthy. This Texas A&M defense is legitimately scary, and I cannot wait to see it against more of the SEC. South Carolina's in a bad place. They may improve at a certain point, but Texas A&M did just enough and probably should have run a little bit more. But good for Texas A&M. They probably would have lost this game a year or two ago.
Yeah. This was a superb defensive effort here. Carolina scored on the first play from scrimmage, a long touchdown run.
Yeah.
And then no more touchdowns the rest of the game. A&M defense had 10 tackles for loss. That was without Myles Garrett, who was banged up and didn't play. They also had 2 other receivers and a lineman who were out on offense. They're basically just gearing up for, I think, some of the bigger games that are coming their way. They've got Tennessee this week. They've got a bye, and then they've got a big road game against Alabama. So they're just trying to get healthy here. I said it before, I'll say it again. Nobody, not even A&M fans, are going to confuse Trevor Knight for a prolific passer. But if he can run like he did the last 2 weeks, and if Travion Williams keeps running the way he has, this is suddenly a multi-dimensional offense. And it reminds me, ironically, of the old spread HD concept that Jay Paterno trotted out back in 2008. Remember that?
My favorite. Oh, yeah.
Do you remember what the HD stood for?
I just assumed high definition because that was like
highly diverse, Dan.
Oh, kiddoke.
Different system, altogether different system. But the goal of the spread HD was 200 yards passing, 200 yards rushing every game. That's not a bad goal to have.
No.
And A&M has delivered on that promise.
Yeah.
The last couple weeks. So new look
Almost
spread HD, whatever you want to call it. A&M getting the job done. They've got a big one this coming week at home against Tennessee. Also in the SEC, what happened with Florida and Vandy?
Only watched a little bit of this game, but Florida beat up front, and Vandy did a good job running on them. They just couldn't sustain drives and convert and turn those into points, just settling for field goals a couple times. Florida couldn't throw the ball downfield with any sort of consistency or success with Austin Appleby, but got going enough, I guess, with Jordan Scarlett to succeed, but survive and advance. Florida doesn't have a passing game and beat up on both sides of the ball. They're not going to do much. So they're fine. They're not great.
Yeah, last year this was a 9-7 game. This one wasn't a whole lot better.
Trending in the right direction. They have LSU next week, though.
Elsewhere in the SEC, Ole Miss won by 20 over Memphis. Auburn,
sloppily.
Yeah, sloppily. Auburn won 58-7 over ULM, and Arkansas won by 42 over Alcorn State.
Yes.
Let's move to finally the Pac-12 here.
I mean, we don't have to.
Some weird stuff going on in the Pac-12.
Some weird, wacky stuff.
Cal wins on a goal line stand.
That's new.
There are literally question marks here behind that statement on my legal pad.
Yeah.
Cal with a goal line stand, huh? That's a new one.
Yeah, well, Davis Webb threw all over Utah for a majority of this game, and throwing all over Utah is not a thing a number of teams do. Troy Williams was pretty good. Not great against the Cal defense, but the Cal defense in a very weird ending where the refs gave Utah a timeout, even though Kyle Whittingham was burning mad that he didn't actually call the timeouts. But Utah a little bailed out by a 4th down PI call that got them down to the 2 with a few seconds left. So they had 3 opportunities, I believe, and just couldn't punch it in at all. They were swung outside. They had a drop and then stuffed at the line for the ultimate play. And man, what a win for Cal.
Big one.
What a strange season for Cal. Just winning in different hemispheres, losing to a pretty decent San Diego State team, even though they did lose last night in a shootout, beating Texas, losing to ASU in a shootout, even though they were up at halftime, and then winning on a defensive stand against a ranked Utah team at home. So Cal feels like the disruptor in the Pac-12.
The Silicon Valley disruptor.
Yeah, it makes sense that they're just dangerous and they're going to disrupt you. Yep, they might lose, but they're gonna mess with you a little bit.
All right. USC 41, ASU 20. The first half of this game was a total bloodbath for Arizona State.
Yeah, it was.
It reminded me of second half Florida from the Tennessee game. I wasn't even sure they knew how to snap the ball on offense. It was just total disarray. Sam Darnold looked pretty good for the second straight week. USC, if they can get it together, I mean, Lord knows they got talent. I don't know if anyone's going to confuse them with a defensive juggernaut, but certainly if you score 41 points against anyone, that at least gives you a chance. So nice game for them to get back on track.
Yeah, I believe I had this, by the way, as a USC get it together game.
You did?
I did indeed. I don't know much.
Yep.
I still don't know much, but yeah, Juju Smith-Schuster, that was the big revelation. Him and Sam Darnold connecting like they were able to.
Also, your boy Theo Howard caught a touchdown for UCLA.
I've been trying to tell you.
Yeah, what up, Theo? It was 45-24.
Tale of two halves in this game. Josh Rosen starts out 9 of 24. They can't run the ball at all. They start opening things up, distributing the ball all over the place in the second half, and it made a difference. Kenny Walker with a huge day. Theo Howard did finally get into it with a nice touchdown catch on his lone reception. And UCLA building in this game. That's the best I can say, because they still are not going to be able to win a ton of games playing like they did in the first half offensively. Still a good defensive effort, but man, was it ugly.
We also got to see Khalil Tate, who came in for Arizona and showed some promise.
Yes, absolutely.
Too little, too late. They lose 45-24. Colorado, a big 31-point win over Oregon State.
Longtime Colorado fan here, Ty.
Yeah.
They are atop the Pac-12 South, and they look outstanding.
And that brings us finally to Washington State, Oregon.
Yeah, Washington State took care of business.
51-33, huh?
Yeah. Yep.
So here's the thing, Dan. This Solid Bowl ain't going to happen in El Paso unless Oregon gets it together in a hurry.
Oh, that doesn't matter because Oregon already has a transitive win because of Virginia beating.
Oh, right.
We're good. I'm totally cool now.
Is Oregon even going to be bowl eligible?
That's a complicated question there, Ty.
They're 2-3. They've lost their last 3 games.
One of which is a FCS team, which does count. You get one.
UC Davis, right?
Mm-hmm.
They need to win 4 games to get bowl eligible. They're 2-3. Here's the remaining schedule.
They got to go 4-3. Yeah.
Yep. They've got Washington, Cal on the road, ASU on the road at USC, home against Stanford, then on the road against Utah and against Oregon State in the Civil War.
Yeah.
I have highlighted Cal, ASU, USC, Utah, and Oregon State. So 5 games of which they need to win 4. That to me does not seem probable.
So you have Stanford and Washington as the sure thing losses.
I do.
Okay. I'm not sure about Stanford. I have no idea what to make of Stanford, but they still have Christian McCaffrey and it's against Oregon's defense. So yeah, that makes sense.
But 4 wins against Cal, ASU, USC, Utah, and Oregon State seems like a lot to ask.
No, I don't see it. And everything I've said these past couple weeks about Oregon, it's all just more true with their performance against Wazoo last night. So listen, Oregon was good for a really long time. I don't know how much time we really should spend on a 2-3, 0-2 team at this point, but Oregon's not good.
Well, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time. What I want to ask is when they're going to fire Mark Helfrich.
I think it depends how they lose, because they're going to lose.
I hear Tom Herman and John Gruden own land in Eugene.
Yeah, hopefully Tom Herman I tweeted this out, really hates pumping his own gas and hates paying sales tax.
Prefers a more eco-friendly part of the United States.
So if Oregon decides to buy out Mark Helfrich and the staff, that puts them in a pretty big hole. And it's not like Oregon is in a good place in terms of state funding and education money. And I don't think they're going to be able to convince boosters to just pay for Oregon's mistakes. I honestly don't. That's why I think Mark Helfrich will be back short of going 3-9 and losing every game by 35.
Would they bring Chip Kelly back?
Would they? If he's available and wants to, yes. I don't see that happening.
Maybe go Art Briles?
nope, don't see that happening either, especially with Oregon's recent history with sexual violence.
Yeah.
The basketball team and the lawsuit. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you, Ty. If they fire Mark Helfrich, I would be about that Mike McIntyre life. That's what I would be about.
Okay. Well, that does it, Dan. We covered a lot of ground here. A wacky week 5, but a fun one. We've got some big games to discuss on our Wednesday show. Don't forget to subscribe at itunes.com/solidverbal. Tell your friends about the show. If you listen on Overcast, recommend the show. Any way you can help and review and rate. All that stuff gets back to us, and all that stuff helps boost the value of the show to other people who might be looking for a college football podcast. So we do appreciate your continued support. We're going to have those t-shirts mailed out to you in pretty short order, right? We put the order through this week. So stay tuned for that. We will update you if there's any more information.
Yeah, Brady Hoke can't screw that up.
No.
That order is clean.
In the meantime, Dan, unless you've got anything else?
No, some Pat League heartbreak.
I saw that, yeah.
But Lehigh is looking very strong.
Looking solid.
They are looking very, very good. And the engineers out there should be very proud of what their squad is doing. But yeah, I think did they destroy Yale? Is that what I saw?
Took apart Yale, I'd say.
They took apart Yale, which is pretty easy. But Lafayette lost, I think, to the Crusaders. It doubly hurts. Georgetown lost, traveling away from the friendly confines of multi-sport field. Fordham lost in OT by 1 to Monmouth. The Nellies beat the Gators. Cornell does those Nellies. And that's it. Yeah. Rough week all around for me, Ty.
All right. Well, I want to thank a few people very quickly if I could.
Please. I would love for you to.
We've gotten emails from folks that we haven't had a chance to respond to. So thank you to Andrew for pointing out some fantasy things that Kirk Herbstreit got for me.
Damn.
An attacking mentality and maybe Tom Herman coaching rumors, some other stuff. We've also got an email here from Dylan and from Sean and from Robert and Michael and Scott and Brandon. Thank you for emailing in, for supporting the show. We've also got people to thank here on the Solid Verbal Facebook page. Thank you to Chris and Chad and Michael and Ken Greeley for continually sharing all of our posts on Facebook.
Yes, he's great. Love Ken.
Also, big thank you to our boy, Chris the Capper, who posts his weekly picks, his weekly locks, now out on Facebook.com/solidverbal each and every week. Thank you to Bobby and Matthew and Jack and Jeff and Ken and Luke and Seth and Sean and too many people here to thank at once, but thank you to everyone for your interest in the show. All right. My lips are parched. I'm ready to go get a cool drink, edit the show, and get this posted.
Listen to the Shutdown Fullcast. Our friends over there listen to Podcast Ain't Played Nobody, even though they're our competition. We love them, and they deserve your ears as well, because you should be listening to a new podcast every day. Yeah, pay attention to SB Nation's college football coverage. It's the best.
For that guy over there, Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildenbrand, thanks again for listening to the Solid Verbal. We will catch y'all in a few days. In the meantime, stay solid.
Peace.